Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Ameya. Good morning, Taranjot. Good morning, Nanak. How are you doing today, Nanak? How's your health? ध्यान रखो बेटा. Yeah. Thank you so much, Nanak. We'll start in a while. Students are still coming in and admitting them in. This is one of the drawbacks of Google Meet, where you have to admit every single individual one by one. Are you having your other classes today? There was this notice that was doing the rounds that Delhi government has declared a holiday today on account of Chhat Puja, and probably a similar kind of a circular has come up from the university as well. But there has been no such, news from the college, no notice from the college. So you have your other classes scheduled today, or are you relatively free today?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Sure, we'll just finish off in 1 hour, and I thought then we won't have to take the theory class tomorrow. I think I have one with IT1, so and as far as our syllabus is concerned, so we are at a very comfortable situation right now. This is your second last topic, and we are left with only one topic now. And with that, we will be able to finish your entire theory syllabus, both the third and the fourth units, right? So maybe next week we will be done with our syllabus. I'll take a 2-hour combined session with all my sections, and we will finish off report writing. And if there is a need, then I might take one more, maybe 1 hour extra some other day. But we are lagging behind in the practical part. The labs have to be conducted regularly because there are still 3-4 activities which are pending. We have to complete the presentations, and then the news reporting and anchoring activities there. We have the mock interview activity pending. And one activity would be declamation and poetry recitation. That would be in the form of a competition. So you already know about it. So I want people to participate in this activity, either in the poetry competition or in the declamation competition. It's a part of your lab thing only, and you will be the art of public speaking, wherein you will mention poetry recitation or oblique declamation competition. Declamation. So, have you got any names so far? Nanak, Prabnoor, Kursparsh from your class?
No, ma'am, not yet.
Okay. Please keep a track of that. Maybe circulate another notice to this effect. I haven't really scheduled the date on which we're going to be doing it, but probably it won't be possible next week, but the week after that for sure. The topics will be given to you in advance. For poetry recitation, there is no specific theme on which you have to recite a poem. It could be a poem of your choice. Any composition, either by you or by someone else, can be recited, but the language will only be English in both the cases. So I think we should get started now. Let me share my screen with you. So we'll start with the public, and this is the topic we're discussing. What makes a good speech? What is the art of rhetoric? What is polemics? Okay, these are the components of speech making, of public speaking, and we'll be touching upon this particular topic today. Now, you see, we've heard many seasoned speakers. We keep listening to them every now and then. There have been great orators in the past and also in the current scenario. You will find people who are very engaging as far as making speeches is concerned. I hope my voice is loud and clear. Yeah. So, public speaking is an exercise where, with repeated experience and exposure, you get better and better. You get the hang of the whole thing as to how do you need to engage the interest of your audience, how do you connect with them, how do you strike a rapport with them, how do you convey your thoughts and ideas in a meaningful sort of a way where the audience feels informed, motivated, entertained, relaxed, for all reasons. For various reasons, you could be engaging with them, delivering a talk, maybe making a speech. And, with time, you may get better and better. Initially, there have been, instances where people have not been very great with speech making, but yes, over a period of time, when they continued to carry out this activity for a long period of time, they became better, and their initial, experiences or their initial exposure would not count as very successful, but slowly and gradually they learned the ropes, they learned the nitty-gritties of it. They understood how to grab and capture the pulse of the audience and make your entire speech meaningful and enriching for your audience. So basically, speech making is an oral form of communication where public speaking, you are engaging with an audience orally. Of course, it is verbal because you're using a language, you're using words. Uh, First, a lot of people, what they do is they write down their speech. Uh, Seasoned speakers, politicians, statesmen, influencers. We have a whole lot of social media influencers these days. So these people, they pen down their thoughts, their ideas, and then they build their entire speech around it. They frame their ideas, structure, give it a certain sense of structure, and make their content meaningful for their listeners, for their audience. So we have to pay attention to the content and the structure of a speech, that is for sure. And you have to start well. Any exposition, whether it is oral or written, it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has a ending. So you have to begin well, you have to make an impact right at the outset. You have to start with a bang, you have to grab their attention, you have to hook their attention, and then in the middle part of your speech, you have to hold their attention. So you have to keep varying your strategies of holding their attention by way of maybe bringing in some humor sometimes, some witticism, some interesting quotations, a whole lot of factual information, facts and ideas you can share with them and make it enriching for them, right? And then also you have to pay attention to the ending as well. The ending also has to be impactful, something memorable, something that is going to stay with them for very long, right? So you end you never end abruptly, you don't end have to pay adequate attention to this part of your speech as well. So give equal amount of attention and consideration to the introductory aspect of your speech, the initial part of your speech. How are you going to begin it? Are you going to begin it with some quotation, with some interesting witty remark? Are you going to maybe come up with something humorous right at the outset? Something witty right at the outset that's going to grab their attention? Are you going to come up with a rhetorical question? A rhetorical question is, the art of, making the whole speech a little more dramatic, a little more theatrical, wherein you ask questions, but you are not looking to get any answers from the audience. They are spoken for effect, right? And rhetorics is basically speaking, persuade people, speak more forcefully, to speak in a way where you are able to bring about a change in their mindset. You're able to perspective or your viewpoint of your point of view, and thus impact them right in the right manner. So that is rhetoric. And a good engaging speaker is able to make use of rhetoric in his speech making. And when the same thing becomes even stronger, when your critique, when your speaking is expressed in much stronger terms, then we call it polemics. I hope I'm making sense to all of you. There's a difference here between rhetoric and polemics, and these are part of your speech making or public speaking, wherein rhetorics is also wherein you speak to persuade people to accepting your perspective and your point of view, and you do it in forceful terms, in emphatic terms, with suitable facts and figures, backing everything with meaningful, interesting data. And polemics again can be written or oral, and it's a scathing critique, again very forceful, very vehement, more aggressive as compared to rhetoric, wherein sometimes you demolish the arguments of your opponents, and you do so in a very strong way. So that is polemics. Now, I've already explained this bit to you, that the body also has to be organized. The body here means the middle part of your speech. So pay attention to the middle. How are you going to keep their attention hooked? What are the ways in which you're going to keep them involved and engaged so that they don't lose interest or they don't find it boring? So this entire speech also has to be signposted. And I've already explained this to you in when I discuss presentation strategies, or when I discuss reading skills. What are signposts? Signposts are basically phrases, words, which enable the writer or the speaker to clarify his logic to the reader or to the audience. So when he uses words like consequence, consequently, however, to the contrary, in light of this, with respect to this, so which means it gives you a sense of direction. It gives you this gives to the reader this kind of a clarity that this is how the speech is proceeding. this is the manner in which the speech is going, right? So that clarity is given with the help of such words. So when the speaker says, well, after having discussed this bit, now I venture to discuss this particular problem. So this will enable the reader to understand when he says that this line of thought considers this to be the most important thought. On the contrary, we have another line of thought which looks at things in a very different way. Again, this is trying to clarify the logic. Or in contrast, we have a different line of thinking. So again, the logic becomes clear when someone uses an expression like that, right? So the reader's point of view gets conveyed in a much clear manner, and there is greater clarity, no ambiguity. It helps you to make a transition from one point to the other, one idea to the other, one thought to the other, and that transition remains very smooth. That movement from one idea to the other, that flow of thought from one point to the other becomes very, very clear and well defined when the speech is properly signposted. So the content also should be engaging, interesting and informative, and plenty of detail must be there. And again, in the concluding part, in the ending of your speech, make sure you reiterate what you have said. You bring back to their minds, to their memory, what were your principal arguments, what were the initial things you started out with when you started your speech, and don't add any new element here. Just consolidate what has been said, just kind of reinforce all the important points, summarize them, and bring all the elements and different threads of the discussion to a logical ending, having an air of finality about it, where it should come across to the listener that, well, the writer, the speaker has said sufficiently what needed to be said and spoken. So wherein they feel satisfied that, okay, they've now come to the end of the speech. Another important aspect of good speech is that how are you presenting it? How are you delivering it? So you have to use your voice to the best of your ability, right? I've been saying this all the while, that if you're blessed with a good voice, nothing like it. You can it can hold the audience in its way if the voice is pleasing, if the voice is rich in texture and tone and tenor. It will captivate the audience automatically, very naturally and spontaneously. But then on occasions, you may have to work on your vocals. You may have to polish your vocals, refine the way you speak, work on your breathing, practice some breathing techniques to make your voice loud and clear. And your volume should be good. Everyone in the room should be able to hear it. If it's in a small room, you're making a speech. If you're addressing a bigger audience in the say an auditorium, again there, using a public address system and making sure that there are no technical glitches and you're able to reach out to everyone in the room is also very important. The rate at which you are speaking is very important. You don't go very fast, neither do you go very slow. So it should not look like a drag. It's going so slowly, you're moving at a very slow pace, snail's pace. And that can be a huge put off for the audience. They must feel engaged. And how will they feel engaged? If the pace is right, if the rate at which someone is speaking is correct, they'll be focusing on it much more. Their mind will not get distracted, and they will not begin to daydream, because they have to keep abreast with the speaker and the pace with which he is speaking. Your voice modulation, your intonation, the variations, so everything does not get spoken at the same pace. At certain points you will slow down a lot, and certain points would be spoken at a much faster rate, right? And similarly, with respect to your volume, your pitch goes high and low. So there is a constant up and down tonality, a rhythm in the way in which you speak. And that is very important. delivery. So paralanguage, vocalics, paying attention to your tone, volume, pauses, avoiding any disfluencies in your speech. Instead of making sound like you just avoid such fillers. Try to make your talk very smooth and seamless, so that everything moves in a very very seamless manner. And also, most of the speeches which are conversational have a greater impact. It should also look like you're having a dialogue, you're having a conversation audience with your listeners. So a good delivery is one where this attribute is present. A good delivery, a good speech is one where it looks like a conversation going on, an interesting animated conversation going on with your audience. And you have to be able to do this with a lot of enthusiasm, with a lot of passion, with a lot of energy and animation, right? So when you are interested in the topic that you are sharing, the theme that you are sharing, then of course you will be able to rub on some of your enthusiasm onto your audience. They will also derive the same pleasure, the same joy, the same interest in the subject matter of your speech. But if you are yourself not very inclined towards speaking, or you're not, you're taking it as a liability, or you're not enjoying the speech you're making, then of course how do you expect the audience to be able to enjoy it? So this is very important. It's paramount that we focus on our energy levels and communicate whatever it is we want to communicate with a good deal of energy, passion and enthusiasm. Good speakers also always maintain eye contact with their listeners, with their audience, right? Keeping the channels of communication open, ensuring that people are listening to you, watching them, observing them, looking at how they are reacting to the things you are saying. Are they listening to you intently? Are they nodding their heads? Are they looking lost somewhere? Maybe are they engaging in some own chit chat of their own? Or are they fidgeting a lot on their chair, getting anxious a lot, maybe moving around a lot because they're finding it boring? So all of that you keep noticing. As a good speaker, it's important that these things give you the clue and the cues that whether the audience is reacting well to your speech, is being responsive to what you are saying or not. And if you feel that somewhere the audience is not enjoying it, or not seeming to be very interested in what you're saying, then you will have to change your strategies. So maybe, maybe you've been speaking for very long and now they look a little distracted, or they're not seem to be too much into it. So what you do is you maybe add some humor somewhere, uh, share an anecdote, some of your own personal life experience, some story from your life, and then make it more interesting and engaging for the listeners. So that's how you have to keep yourself on your toes and keep observing them for these little cues which will enable you to speak in a more effective way and be able to deliver your talk in a meaningful way and remarkable sort of a way. And never ever use a paper. A lot of times people read out their speeches. That's the worst kind of speech you can ever make. If you happen to read everything out of a paper, nobody's going to enjoy it. The connect, the rapport with the audience would be missing there entirely. So never ever sound canned or memorized or overtly rehearsed. What you can do as a speaker is, jot down the points. You can carry note cards. Note cards is a good strategy. It's something where this is the framework of your speech. These are the important points you would want to cover, and one look at those points and you know how to elaborate them. You don't necessarily have to write everything down. Let it be spontaneous, let it be natural, let it not look like you've learned everything by heart, right? And these note cards assist your memory. They give you the right points, the right facts, figures, maybe some examples which you want to share and discuss with the audience. So you just pen them down at specific places where you would want to incorporate them in the structure of your speech. So only little keywords and points would be there in those note cards. And it's perfectly fine if you happen to carry these note cards. At least you will have something to fall back on in case you go blank somewhere and you don't know what to say next, or you lose the your chain of thought, or the thread of what you're speaking. You can fall back on your note cards and read out from there, maybe get that little cue from there, that okay, this is another point which can be spoken about or elaborated. So uh, also pay attention to your expressions. Your face is has to be animated. Your face must express your joy, your energy, your enthusiasm. If you're finding the topic interesting, that interest must get communicated through your gestures, through your body movements, through your face. So good speakers are a little dramatic also. There's a little bit of an actor in every good speaker. So they can emote with their face. They can become serious, and they can laugh, and they can discuss things, say things with a lot of cheer and joy and energy. So all of that is very, very important to make your speech impactful. So make sure that your posture is good, you're using your hands to gesticulate and to emphasize a point, to move from one point to the other. A little bit of movement is acceptable. Don't move a lot, because that can act as a distraction. So I've already told you about note cards, but of course, never ever read the entire speech. Note cards can be kept on a podium in front of you. If you have a podium in front of you, then you can leave your note cards there so that your hands are free and you can use your hands for your gestures. And it is also important that the ideas that we have, are relevant. We have a good speech is one where you have good ideas to share, good thoughts to share. And how are you going to word them? How are you going to dress your thoughts in words? How are you going to present your thoughts and ideas in words is also important. So the way you are structuring it is important, but more so, what would be more impactful and which will have a greater impact on the audience would be what is it that they're getting from you? What are the ideas that they're receiving? So make sure you have good, interesting, relevant ideas which will benefit your audience. Also practice your speech, right? So you can do that in front of the mirror, in front of maybe a family member, a trusted person, or maybe even imagine an imaginary audience in front of you, and keep the note cards in front of you where the keywords are listed, the structure of your speech is listed. Time yourself, clock yourself, make sure you're not exceeding your time. If you are given 20 minutes to speak, so make sure you wind up your speech in those 20 minutes, and try to go through those note cards a few times. Even if you've written your speech down, you don't have to learn it by heart. Just read it a few times, repeat it, and you'll be able to recall and recollect most of the points which are mentioned there. So I hope I'm making sense to all of you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me know. And yes, I have told you already, the speech has to be conversational in its quality, in its attribute, in its tone, and project enthusiasm to your audience. There must be a deep-seated desire in you to communicate with them, to reach out to them, to benefit them in some way and maintain eye contact. A lot of times you will find that people also cite their sources in their speeches. This is to enhance the credibility of your talk. So when you come up with certain arguments, you can support them with valid research, with valid findings, with valid things you have read from some specific sources. So acknowledging that sometimes that these ideas are not your own, or that you can give the credit to the original source of those ideas and be as honest, is also very important for a good speaker, for a good orator. To display higher levels of integrity and honesty is very important. The way we cite our sources in our research papers, similarly we can cite our sources in our speeches. So you don't have to go into a whole lot of detail about your sources, but something like this will be appropriate. So according to a recent article in Wired magazine, or according to James Paul Gee, the author of 2007 book Good Video Games and Good Learning. So and then you can proceed with whatever your point is, right? Or a scientific article published in a 2010 issue of Pediatrics found that. So this is your way of citing your sources, also lending greater credibility to what you're speaking. So people would know that, well, this man has made an effort to find out, and he's not saying things off the cuff. He or she has done a good deal of research and has her facts and figures right, and therefore they'll be more than happy to receive that information from them. And also we must keep our eyes on the prize, and the prize here is the applause we're going to get from the audience, the acknowledgement we're going to get from the audience, the acceptance we are going to get from the audience when after we've made the speech, when they come up to you and tell you that, whoa, you were so wonderful and we really enjoyed listening to you, or I think the point that you made about that was so enriching and so meaningful. It did make a whole lot of sense to me. I think that's your prize as an orator, as a speaker. And of course, any good orator, any good seasoned speaker also is someone who might feel a little sense of uncertainty, a little sense of anxiety, a little nervousness. But then you have to hold on to your nerves, overcome your fears and anxieties, and display utmost poise and confidence in front of your audience so that you can make a better impact on them with your speech making. You're able to convince them of your ideas, you're able to persuade them about the things you are saying and conveying to them, and that will all make a whole lot of sense to them. So I hope all this is clear to each one of you. Any
Yes, ma'am.
doubts, any queries, any questions in this regard? Anything you've not been able to follow? I'm still not done with this. I also want to bring in this element of oratory, how it has come up from the classical Greeks, right? Where oratory was a big thing in ancient Greece, right? We have scholars and thinkers and philosophers like Plato and Aristotle who have spoken a lot about public speaking. So there used to be this whole culture of public speaking in ancient Greece, and people would come onto the public sphere and share their ideas and thoughts and views about world, about polity, about society, about all kinds of important issues and themes, right? So these thinkers have propounded certain techniques and certain strategies and certain ways of making a good speech. So we will quickly go through some of that. A good speech has to be short. This is important, right? And Ecclesiastes has said this, that you should be able to convey in few words whatever important you want to convey. And as we know, public speaking is a public performance. You're speaking in front of an audience, you're speaking in front of some group, some gathering, right? And you are persuading your audience of your point of view, as the orator is trying to convince them of his own perspective. This is also the art of rhetorics. So you first gain their attention, and then convince them of your perspective, maybe bring about a change in their mindset by sharing your views and ideas about things, so that they begin to accept them, begin to acknowledge them, and begin to feel that, oh yeah, that's a valid point and that's how it should be, right? So Thomas Babington Macaulay, the famous politician and writer, even he said that the object of oratory is not truth but persuasion. Good oration, good speech making is not only about saying the truth, speaking the truth, sharing the truth, but it is also about how well can you convince and persuade your listeners, your audience. So there is a literary context, a rhetorical context to this, and that comes from classical Greek oratory. And this is an image from ancient Greece where some kind of a debate is going on. And if you look at the classical oration and the points which have been shared by them about what makes or what constitutes a good speech, then these are the points. It must begin well. It must have an introduction, or the other Latin word given to it is exordium. So that's where you begin, you draw the interest of your audience, and then you narrate it. Narratio. Narratio is you share all the factual information and you try to define the problem. And then confirmation or confirmatio. So again, this is where you come up with all the important arguments to support your perspective. And this is where the whole essence of your speech lies, the central theme, the central idea, and the nuts and bolts of your case, the nitty-gritties, the finer nuances of your speech lie. And then there is refutation. There may be other orators you are addressing, other speakers before you or after you. So there may be people with different perspectives. So you counteract them, you give counter arguments, you demolish their arguments, you challenge their arguments. So this is also a part of good oration, right? So you consider your audience, and keeping them in mind, you try to present how your perspective is better than other people's perspective, or how their arguments don't hold much water. So this has to be done, this refutation, this rebuttal, this kind of minimizing someone else's argument, so that you can show how the arguments you are making are more valid and more meaningful. And then bringing everything to a satisfying close is the conclusion, or the peroratio. And we know of Aristotle, who was a logician and a philosopher, and he's written 3 books on rhetoric, and he's given some very important tips, which are still very relevant. If you want to engage in public speaking, deliver a talk publicly, these tips will be useful even today, right? They are relevant and useful even for all kinds of speech making done in this day and age. So you have to be logical, you have to think clearly, your arguments must be reasonable. So reason cogently in a very valid sort of a way, your logic and argument is the life and soul of any persuasion. This is what rhetorics is all about. Rhetorics is the art of persuasion. So how well can you persuade people through your lies? Also, good knowledge of human nature. How do people think differently? How do people react differently? How can people be convinced? How can people be, accept someone else's perspective? So when you have good insights into human nature, you can convince them well with your speech making. So observing the emotions, also emotional intelligence. Your emotional intelligence will come into play when you're dealing with an audience. So knowing what your feelings and emotions about various things are, and what are the feelings and emotions of your listeners, of your audience, will enable you to come up with the right content and the right manner of presenting it. So paying attention to how you deliver it, use correct language, meaningful language, enriching language, and arranging all your ideas and thoughts in a proper way. And and you look at when you are writing down your speech, these are the three things you will be considering. The subject of your speech, what is it that you would be dealing with? You've been called to deliver a talk on, say, terrorism. You've been called to deliver a speech on, say, the economic growth of our country. You've been called to deliver a talk on the status of women in our country. So whatever is the subject, subject matter, you will do thorough research on that subject. And who are you engaging with? The audience. Who are the people at the receiving end? Are they the audience, largely made of women, or it's a combined cross section of people? So when you have prior knowledge of these things, it will enable you to draft your speech, write your speech accordingly, and come up with those points which will resonate well with them, which they will be able to relate in a much better way. And of course, what is your purpose? Are you there as an expert who's going to be talking? Are you there to motivate people? Are you there as a chief guest to encourage and inspire them? So what is the purpose of your speech? These factors have to be taken into consideration, and then accordingly you start writing your speech down. And when we talk of the rhetorical triangle, then these are the three most important components: logos, ethos, and pathos. Logos means logic, ethos means ethics, and pathos means emotions, right? So in your talk, in your speech, you can appeal to the logic of the people. You can come up with certain arguments where you can convince them with the soundness of your logic. If your logic is right, they will feel convinced. They will feel, oh yeah, I think that's a very valid thing he has said. It sounds it's quite amenable to reason. It's very logical, and they will be convinced. But somewhere when logic fails, when you think that you cannot appeal to the people with logic, you cannot reason out with them, their emotions can be played. You can play on their emotions, you can appeal to their emotions. So certain arguments can be more emotional in nature, and sometimes ethos can be utilized where you feel even logos and pathos will not work. Then ethos can be employed in your talk. Ethos is the credibility of the speaker and the writer. How does he manage to show that certain things are right and certain things are wrong? The ethics of it, the morals of it, that certain things are noble, certain things are ignoble. So appealing to someone's good sense, appealing to someone's ability to think ethically and think morally, is how you can appeal to them and then make them realize that, well, this is what our culture tells us, this is what our tradition demands, and therefore this is how we should be doing it. So they will immediately feel a connect there, because you've appealed to their good sense, you've made an appeal to their ethics, and that will resonate well with them. I hope I'm making sense here.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then you will find that a great speech is one where you're able to grab the people's emotions. You're also able to manipulate the listeners. A good speech is, as I said, it's all about your rhetorics. It's all about how well do you persuade people? How well do you engage with them? How well do you connect with them? Just give me a moment. There's a lot of noise here in my house. So a good speech is one where you're able to manipulate your listeners into accepting your perspective, into believing in what you are saying. So you give them plenty of concrete information, a lot of interesting emotive examples, use your words and phrases in an interesting way, provide them a whole ribbon of facts, a whole range of facts and information, maybe even practical suggestions for what action can be taken, for what kind of things people can do, and that is what constitutes a good speech, wherein rhetorics is also employed in a wholesome way, in a meaningful way. And the techniques are very simple. Sometimes you can come up with your own interesting life stories, which are called anecdotes, right? So when you narrate some instance from your own life, it makes a good connection with the audience. They're able to relate to it, becomes appealing for them. So some incident from your childhood, some incident from your adult life, maybe the time when you were struggling, and now you can look back at it and derive your lessons from it. So that strikes a chord somewhere with the audience. Also, arrange your speech in a logical way. There has to be a structure. A speech should not go on and on and on, rambling in any direction where you don't know which way you are going. There's no head or tail. There has to be a head or tail. A good speech is one where there is a sense of direction, there's a sense of flow, there is a certain logic attached, there's a certain method even in a good speech. And that is something that you can always work on by creating a framework for your speech, deciding beforehand, planning beforehand, preparing beforehand, that this is how my speech would be structured. This would be the framework. This is my blueprint. And this is how I'm going to go about it and elaborate the various points. So bring in some humor, some pace, change of pace, bring in some emotion, nice, interesting expressions, some interesting, thoughtful quotes. And personalization really helps, where you, instead of generalizing things, where you try to show how things are very general in nature, you try to personalize it, bring it much closer to you and your audience. So when you say things like all of us in this room, or those of us who have been missing from this particular thing, or each and every one of us, or this is where the whole thing becomes more personalized, and there's a greater connect with the audience. And you can also use the rule of threes. I'll be talking about three important things, or let me talk about three interesting ideas here. So this is the rule of three. Maybe using this rule also, this technique also, you can elaborate your speech. And don't do a whole lot of things. Just make sure that you do the relevant things. Otherwise, the whole effect will get diluted. So rhetoric is culturally determined. Different cultures have different degrees to which people will practice rhetorics. If you listen to speeches from different cultures, in some cultures the speeches are going to be very fiery, very aggressive, very strongly worded, because there is a different level or a different degree of rhetorics which is practiced by people from different cultures. So this is something we have to bear in mind. They will try all the tricks in their that are possible to convince the reader, the listener, into believing in you. So and the level to which it can go, again, as I said, will vary from one culture to the other. Yes, by using rhetorics, what are we doing? What are we achieving? We are achieving acknowledgement from the audience. We are inducing cooperation from the audience, so that they accept, they begin to acknowledge. So when we share with our audience our views about the evils of dowry, or when we start talking to them and talk about the evils of feticide, female feticide, and how the whole society, the balance in the society can go bust if we were to practice that. So we are bringing about a change in their mindset. We are making them begin to acknowledge it, making them begin to accept our perspective, so that there's a certain level of acceptance achieved. And rhetorics is what? It's a discourse which is affecting your audience. And how are you affecting them? You can use all the ways which are at your disposal. You can use any trick under your hat, to convince them. You can inform them, give them suitable information, research, site sources. You can move them, maybe come up with an emotional story, some emotional anecdote, and then maybe convince them, delight thoughts, teach them, motivate them, do anything. So wherein you are impacting the audience, wherein you are affecting and bringing about a change in their way of thinking. So that is what rhetorics is all about. It's a very, very critical element of speech making. And when this becomes more prominent and more profound, and even more, as I said, you are going beyond a certain level, then it becomes polemics. So polemics is a much strongly worded speech, a more aggressive kind of a speech. And it can be both written and oral. So good speech is one where you know the audience, you know the purpose, you know your subject matter, and you make use of pathos, logos, and ethos. So you make a logical appeal. If logical appeal does not work, you can make an emotional appeal. If an emotional appeal does not work, then you can talk of credibility. What are the things that people should do and not do, in terms of morals, moral values. And logos, as I said, you can use cause and effect kind of a thing in order to elaborate your logic. Deductive reasoning, where you are deriving your reasoning from a principle, and inductive reasoning, where there is no principles, but there is only your experience from which you are reasoning. And contradictions, finding the lacunas, the shortcomings in the arguments of your opposition, and then trying to hit a nail in the coffin, maybe show that your argument is valid and better than theirs. Ethos is all about credibility. So how you can show your own specialist knowledge, your expert knowledge, where the audience begins to trust you for your word, maybe through the consistency and predictability of your behavior. They're able to determine what is right and what is wrong. And pathos is all about emotions. Again, you can appeal to their negative emotions, wherein you want to generate and arouse their fear, their sense of discrimination or revenge, or you can appeal to their positive emotions, wherein you are able to arouse their feelings of brotherhood and justice. And you use a whole lot of figurative speech, figures of speech, metaphors, rhetorical questions to convey your point. So Cicero was a Roman statesman, and he says that all good orators make good use of their body language and the way they speak, the tone, the volume, for all emotional emphasis. So this is again a repeat of what has already been discussed. This slide is not for you. And these are some very interesting quotations which are extracted from speeches, which show you the depth of the thought and the idea. So, for out of the war came a lesson which transcended the horror and the tragedy, horror and tragedy and the inexcusable folly. So, it is a scathing critique, a very rhetorical way of presenting, a persuasive way of presenting the horrors of war. Again, another lines from a speech. 14 of the victims of the tragedy came from Australia. Now, you see rhetorical questions in this one. It is time to move the process of reconciliation forward with a little more speed. That is the task. If not now, when? If not us, who? These are rhetorical questions. You're not looking for answers from the audience, but you make it dramatic, you make it theatrical in order to convince and persuade your audience that, well, it's time we started working in this direction, and we are the onus is on us, and we are the ones who have to take charge and take action. We are all familiar with Aung San Suu Kyi, and we know how about her steady struggle in her country, home country Burma, against the government, and how she was, put under house arrest for many years. And look at the speech she has given. It's an extract from her speech where she talks about, as the shackles of prejudice and intolerance fall from our own limbs, we can together strive to identify and remove the impediments to human development everywhere. So again, the depth of thought, the enriching language, the image from our own limbs. See the image that is being created. We have to discard prejudice and intolerance. They are all there in us. We have to throw them out. We have to just get out of it, make our limbs free from all these chains and shackles that are there. So just see the beautiful way in which it has been worded, the figurativeness of the speech. So many will reject any notion that some of the legacies of the past live in the present and need to be dealt with. Again, a very interesting sample here. And this is another one wherein a writer is talking about the novels and the kind of impact novels have on people. So she herself is a literature person. Novels are ambiguous and multifaceted, and not because they are perverse, but because they attempt to grapple with what was once referred to as the human condition, and do so using a medium which is notoriously slippery, namely language itself. So the importance of language in novels, and how novels are very ambiguous and also very versatile, and they can grapple with a whole lot of things which can portray the human condition very, very well. And another lines from the speech here: any life lost in war is a human life, irrespective of its being that of an Israeli or an Arab. So the depth of thought, the depth of idea, the feeling, the pain, the emotion. Some speeches are little emotional in nature, some are little logical in nature, some would strike your ethics and your moral sense, and your belief in certain ways of thinking and certain ways of conduct. So with this, we've come to the end of our discussion on this topic. Any questions, anything that you would want me to elaborate further, or any doubts in your minds? I am ready to take any queries from you. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just asked, are there any queries, any questions, anything that you would want to share, observe, ask? Okay then. So thank you so much for being here. And I think with that, we've come to the end of our session, and we'll call it a day. Okay, bye-bye everyone. Take care. Enjoy yourself.